Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this monthly in-depth ag forecast brought to you by AgSouth and Ag Carolina. Now, as we get into this forecast, some of the things we were concerned about a month ago did come into fruition, and that was largely around the narrative that we were concerned that some of the longer-range models had picked up on a drought signal, and we can see it now. You look back over the last 30 days, parts of Georgia, coastal North and South Carolina, we've seen some really dry conditions, and the last 2 weeks here have been really dry. And I want to talk about this because as I take you through what I think is going to be the bigger drivers of the climate system for the next, let's call it 90 to maybe 120 days, I'm concerned that a few things are in position to give us more drought risk than maybe the risk of gaining some ground and returning some better precipitation. And it's not the narrative that I want to carry, but it's the narrative that I'm seeing. So I'm just going to preface it with this. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that something comes along and pushes hard against this forecast. And there is something in there that I want to talk about, because as you look back over the last 14 days, you've been staring at this map now, it's been extremely dry. You look back over the last month and say, what do the statistics look like? Well, since the beginning of November, we've got significant portions of AgSouth and Ag Carolina territory, including more of the South and Southeast, that are looking very dry. Statistically, it's one of the top 5 driest. November is on record for a lot of folks in through here. If you look at the soil moisture, we've got several areas we're keeping an eye on. In addition to how dry things are here, we're also watching a big chunk of the Corn Belt, the Midwest, Upper Midwest, Northern Plains, that has also missed out on quite a bit of this precip. So where's it been wet? It's been wet out west. And the big reason is we've had these cutoff lows come through. They just meander and they sneak right in through here and then exit through the mid-Atlantic. And that's been the pattern now for much of the end of this month of November. And we're finally seeing a little bit of change to it, but it's not yet going to take full effect on reviving our total kind of moisture package that I would like to see happen as we slide ourselves into winter. So newest drought monitors on the left, we're up to 70% coverage in the lower 48 in terms of drought. You can clearly see large pockets of it around the country, but the degradation in the drought is best seen here. Over the last 4 weeks, let's just kind of blow this map up here. It's just on the Drought Monitor website. We're going to go over to Change Maps, and I'm going to go over here to not 1 week, but we're going to go 4 weeks, and there's that map. So you start to see that big chunks of Georgia really have settled into deeper drought. We had some improvement that came into parts of kind of the mountainous areas to the west, but other than that, it's been pretty dry, especially the last few weeks. Okay, why? Well, this is the narrative you need to kind of learn from me today. This is a map looking at low-level wind speeds since the end of October. And what I want you to see is we've had a lot of flow that's done that. Do you see it? That's a lot of drier continental air that's getting pushed, east. It's not this. It's not that, which is where we tend to get our moisture from. If you look at the anomalies, so this would be I showed you the average. Now this is the difference from average. We've even seen the wind accelerating as it leaves the coast, meaning that we're just pulling that dry air out. And this is the pattern that got us there. We saw a big ridge north and west of Hawaii. Flow came over the top. All these little cutoff lows came down here. And they just slowly kind of worked their way under this ridge. They couldn't go over it. There was a pretty sizable ridge there. And then on the backside, it all came together, but you were getting flow that was doing that around a trough in this area. See that? So that's the setup. That's the pattern we need to kick out, and we're going to wonder if that's going to take shape. Because not only did this affect the precip, it also affected the temperature pattern. And we've had some decent shots at some cooler air in the month of November. And we've got a big one coming for Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, I hope you all get to watch this before Thanksgiving, because I want you to be prepared for that. I'm sure you're watching your phone apps and your local meteorologists, but it's some cold air coming through. But so far in the month, it's been extremely mild. So here's the big idea. We have colder air coming. It's not now. It's not even tomorrow. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And what we're going to be watching over the next 5 days is this corridor of colder air. And this is how things shape up once we get out there November 30th through December 5th. Now, what's interesting about this is we actually see across the southeast some mild conditions. And we're curious if that's actually going to be able to drive a system toward us, not in this next week. There's only a weak system coming through in the next few days. But what about week 2? Because whenever we see the temperature contrast, in fact, let's go back to it here. Look at the temperature contrast out there, day 10 through 15. It's right here. Most winters, if we can get that in shape, we tend to have high pressure sitting somewhere in this vicinity that just pumps and gives us better chances for getting some moisture in place. But I've got questions about it, because if you look out over the next 15 days, well, take a look. That moisture pump seems to be here. but we see near normal precipitation where we've been driest. It's wetter the farther north you go in Georgia or farther west you go in the Carolinas, but we see near normal with drier conditions just offshore and down into Florida. Another model, this is the GFS. Now you see it's got the same pattern, but it's even a bit more dry in these areas. So I'm waiting to see the atmosphere punch through this and deliver the moisture that's needed. And we got to get in there and kind of figure out when and where that's going to happen. Now, unfortunately, I hate to say it this way, but the best way to break through this would be a nice big push of severe weather. Now, we don't want that, but that would at least give the indication of a strong enough front to drive the flow through the area to get just to break things up and to get rid of this drought and put some moisture down. And so today, I'm recording this here on the 25th. We do have the risk, but it's to our west. And if you want to go in there and look at it, this is what we're expecting out of this system moving through later in the day on Tuesday the 25th toward Wednesday the 26th. And you just kind of see a narrow band of some showers and storms coming through. Not a whole lot of severe risk out of this. There could be some isolated stronger storms, but you see the isolated nature of the storms? There's no big blanket of rainfall. It's just several of these little pockets of storms. And where are we in time? This is tomorrow morning on Wednesday the 26th. Now behind it, you see the blue. We're talking about cold enough air to make some snow. And I cannot rule out some snow showers on Thanksgiving at our highest elevations here in the Smokies. And there's going to be a big temperature change coming with this. But in terms of total precipitation, we're not talking about a lot. You can see where the wetter conditions are going to be here. The streaky nature of those storms are what's coming through there. So what are we dealing with? Well, all the action's pretty far away from us. It's in the north central United States. And that's where we're seeing the major shift over to winter storm issues, stronger winds, better chances for precip. And it's struggling to get down here to the southeast. I would like to show you the model so you can kind of see it. On the left, I have the GFS. On the right, I have the European. First system sneaks through. There it is. Just bringing a little chance of rainfall. When is this? This is Wednesday. What's happening on Thanksgiving? So this is your Thanksgiving evening forecast. No problem here with precip. It's just cold. And I'll show you those temperatures in a moment. So we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. This is the weekend. This is this Saturday, getting into Sunday. And by possibly Monday, see this? Sunday night into Monday morning, there's a system that's going to possibly drop some big snows in the Midwest toward the Northeast around the Great Lakes. And for us, it might drag a front through. Notice the European model is more aggressive with its delivery of that moisture, while the GFS is waiting. So the GFS doesn't have this big Sunday, Monday system. That's only in the Euro. The GFS is later. It's coming through Monday night into Tuesday and Wednesday when the Europeans cleared it out and brought in colder air again and higher pressure. See the model differences here? They're terrible right now. We can zoom in and have a closer look. Have a look at the European model. That's through Wednesday. Okay, so just the scattered storms coming through. We know we go drier after that until we get into the weekend system. This is now Saturday, Sunday. Here it is, Monday. See the push toward precipitation Sunday, Monday? But even at that, if I take you out a full 10 days, 10 days to finish November and start December, and we're looking at rainfall totals less than a half inch, maybe some better precip along the coast, certainly better precipitation the farther west you go. But these are minuscule totals. And the GFS is trying too. This is all the way through Sunday, so you can tell it's not putting down much moisture through Thanksgiving and the weekend. But it was a later system, so it's trying to bring it in Monday, Tuesday. And even at that, if I take it out 10 days, it's not as though it's reviving our drought situation. You see, we've got to get systems to dig hard. They need to be what we call Miller B systems, which means they come out of the panhandles, go into the Ohio Valley, come all the way to the Mid-Atlantic and turn north, or Miller A systems, as is just named after the guy that defined these. They come along the Gulf Coast and then make the turn as a nor'easter. And we're not getting either of those right now. So the net effect of this is that we have a drier signal. In fact, let's do something real quick here. I'm just going to come over, open a new tab, go to one of my favorite weather sites, WeatherBell, and I want to just show you. Let's go to the European ensemble. Let's take the 0Z run, and I tell you what, let's look at probabilities. I'm curious what the chance is in the model of staying below a half inch. And if I take it out a week, look at that. We've got a 50 to 80% chance at staying below a half inch. And even as I take it out 10 days, there's 10 days, we're still in that drier pattern overall. Everybody you see white on this map has the chance of going over that half inch. And the wettest conditions are now here. So this is the probability of going over an inch. And now we see how close to our doorstep it is, but it's just not there for us yet. So, pattern. What's going on? Well, the Bermuda High in the mid-levels of the atmosphere is here. We need it to come a lot closer. The Pacific High is messing everything up. Can you almost see the omega block to this? That's reinforcing this trough. And what is that trough doing? That trough is driving colder air, which by the time it gets to us is drier air, keeping things just away from getting and staying wet. Now, the models are still trying. They're still trying to push systems around the base of that trough. So if you look at them, okay, look, week 2 in the European model, week 2 in the CPC. This again would be like the third through the second through the ninth. They're trying, but I'm skeptical until I finally see something break through. In other words, are we really going to have a chance of getting a little bit wetter than average conditions in the week 2 pattern? That's going to be a big question mark for me until I see the atmosphere break it down. Now, as I said, today, if you get to watch this today or tomorrow on the day before Thanksgiving, man, we got some mild conditions, but look at our frost line over the next 7 days. Could make it all the way to the coast. And here's what's going on. High temperatures on Tuesday the 25th. Still warm on the 26th, but there's that cold front, and by the time we get to the 27th, that's Thanksgiving, our temperatures are now knocked down, 5-10 degrees cooler than average. They're the same, actually worse, on Black Friday here with temperatures struggling to get out of the 40s and 50s. But then as we go farther, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we see a bit of a buildup while the cold air starts to settle in here. Your minimum temperatures, if you just want to see, these are all on agweather.com. You just watch. There's the warmth on Wednesday, replaced by cold on Thursday. There's the really cold air on Friday, which is when we expect to see our furthest extent to the south of the frost. But then we do start to moderate, not Saturday, but Sunday, Monday. Okay? Bigger picture, take a look at this. Next 5 days, we got it. Okay? What about day 5 through 10? That's when we have access to a lot of cold air in the Midwest. But something is reviving our temperatures here. And it's all about the ridge. And if that ridge could just stay here and not there, we would start to get better and better chances of precip. Now, as it stands, it's not in terrible position. We're going to set up the storm track right in through here. But man, if I could just nudge it further out to open up better moisture into the Carolinas, into Georgia, into Florida, we'd be in much better shape. But as it stands, you get out there past the first couple of days of the start of December, and we actually start to see some mild conditions coming through. Now, what you have to remember is it's really December. So I may look at a 5-day swath and see above average temperatures, but you may have wildly varying, high and low temperatures each day. It's just on average, it's mild. All the coldest air is farther to the north. So that brings me to this. All the rest of these slides are all long range, which is what I like to focus on. The Climate Prediction Center released its new forecast for the month of December. And you see how close it's got you to the proximity of that ridge? Drier and warmer. We need to understand if this is really going to be the case, and then start to take a longer-term assessment of what's going on in drought. Now, once again, if you look out there at the forecast from from the European model, it's got that high-pressure cell sitting here. So look, around it is where the heaviest rains are expected to be. And we are worried that we're going to be too closely tucked into this ridge and therefore not see the revival of rains that we need, but have the odds tilted more in the favor of being on the drier side of average. Now the question is, if you want to get a little nerdy with me today, what's going on here? Why is that high sitting there? And what's going on around the rest of the country too? Well, some of this has to do with this thing called the MJO. And right now, just take a look at this. You got two graphics. The MJO is going into phase 7, likely comes into phase 8 and phase 1 too. Now we need to know what that even means. Some of you maybe that watch my content regularly, like, oh yeah, I understand the MJO. You've talked about it a lot, but let's just take a look at this. Now, this is how we really view what's going on in the MJO. All right, and you're going, okay, what? It's just a contour map of hills? No, it's actually a look at where the best rising air is on the planet. And right now, and for the next 8 or 9 days, see this little swath in through here? Geographically, if you can get yourself oriented, that starts over Indonesia and then races to South America. See that? What that's going to do in its wake is possibly set up 2 time periods here and here where we drop right into this area a bunch of sinking air. That makes the air rise there, which over the top of that is this location, which I'm going to write a number over. That's phase 8. Now, why this all matters is if we look at a diagram and say, well, what happens if you're in phase 7 or phase 8? this is what happens. See that ridge? In December, the placement of that ridge will be everything. Now, here it is. This is where the mistake could be in the forecast. We are pretty well settled into thinking there'll be a big trough over the Hudson Bay. If that ridge, though, slides any farther to the, this direction, we open up to moisture and we get it. It rains. If it slides at all toward the west, we are blocked off and extremely dry. We are sitting here and kind of on the precipice on a knife's edge where the atmosphere is signaling that something like that ridge placement, if it shifts at all, could give us an entirely different outlook than the one you just saw from the Climate Prediction Center or the European model. What do I mean? Like, look, that could all move here if the ridge goes out farther to the open Atlantic. You got it? That's a big piece of this. We are pretty well, convinced that we're going to be seeing the deep trough over the Northeast to the Hudson Bay to the North Atlantic. Now, how do we notice that? Well, this is another style diagram we call a Hofmüller. There's today going forward all the way to the day after Christmas. Now, what you're looking at is I want you to find the blues. I'm going to outline them here a bit for you. There we go. Let's do a little drawing. There it is. Now, what in the world does all that mean? Blues are troughs. Reds are ridges. Where's this trough? Right there. See it? And that trough in that area is what could, if we can get the subtropical ridge, that's the high pressure cell I was just telling you about, we get it to just move. Yeah, it would be in business. Now, why I think there is still a ton of uncertainty in this is take a look at what's going on elsewhere in the atmosphere. You've probably seen in the news or heard other folks talking about the polar vortex. It's an absolute mess right now. This could be a major signal for us later in winter. It's not right now, but what's going on is the polar vortex is stretched way out like this. And there's a big, I'll put an X over it, what we call stratospheric sudden warming event. Now, what's going on here? Normally, if I showed you the polar vortex, it would just be spinning like that. And right now, it's a mess. And it's the weakest I think we've ever observed in early December and late November. Normal is there. The range is here. See that one to that one. We're way down there. Now, it's going to recover, but there's a lot of uncertainty that it could get, displaced again later in December. And the more that polar vortex starts wobbling around like this, the better the chances of a more, unsettled weather pattern we're going to have than one that's just stuck where the ridges prevent us from getting the moisture. You see what I'm doing here? I'm trying to look for the caveats to this. There's another piece of this as well, and it's our La Niña. Now, we know that La Niñas, and I'll prove this to you by looking at historical numbers, typically make the southern tier of the United States mild and dry for winter. But what's going on with this La Niña? This La Niña for months has been building. That's with stronger trade winds. It's been pushing against westerly wind bursts out of what's called the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole. This is all nerd speak, for the trade winds have been clashing right here over Indonesia. Now, why does that matter? The Indian Ocean just gave up, which means the stronger trade winds are going to exhaust, and they're going to allow the MJO to start to move around. And if you're saying, well, Eric, you're giving me a bunch of acronym word salad here. I know, but these are the things I stare at every day, and I want to show you the end results of this, okay? First of all, if La Niña was the most dominant factor, which it is losing ground, understand that. You see what I've labeled here? Wetter northwest, drier across the southern tier of the United States. And look, can you see the presence of that ridge? Keeping it drier here? That's the risk. That's what La Niñas do. Here is what they do to temperatures. We tend to be mild in the southwest and near normal, maybe mild in the southeast, with most of our cold air intrusions locked farther to the north. They do occasionally, like you're going to see over Thanksgiving, get down to us, but they don't just plant themselves there. We tend to be more mild during winter. So we come back to the forecast. That is now a blown up view of the December outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. Now you see why it looks the way it does? See now why they're drier south and wetter north? That's the typical historical pattern of a La Niña. But there's something else to this I think we need to discuss. I always get asked, what are the analog years? I went through and I showed you a minute ago. See all these years? These are all analog years that I was looking at. Okay? See 2017? That one's caught my attention because in late November 2017, it looked very similar to late November 2025 in terms of global ocean temperature patterns. If you just step back and blur your eyes, you would know that these are two different images, okay? Now, why are we going to do this? Well, we're going to do this because what happened in December of 2017? It was mild here. Cold air intrusions there. We were near normal. Take a look, though. Drier in this area, but wetter at times right in through here. The West Coast was dry. Now, do I think 17 is going to be the exact match? Nope, I don't. I think it's more of a temperature match than a precipitation match for 2025. I think what you could do to modify this is probably keep this corridor wetter. But I'm worried about what it means for us in the southeast. So let's keep going. What happened in January through March? Well, this is where I really don't want the 2017 into 2018 analog to work, because we were extremely wet in the Mississippi, the Delta, the Arkansas, the part of the Red River, getting up to the Tennessee Valley and then the Ohio Valley, and bone dry here, and mild. So this is a concerning analog. But do I think it's going to be the right analog? Well, let me show you this. Here's the new forecast from the Climate Prediction Center. Again, they're mild and they're drier. They're wetter in the Ohio Valley. Do you see how it lines up with the analogs we've been looking at? What about February, March, and April? Still drier. But I think these models are way hung up on the La Niña signal and the analog years from those La Niñas. And I think we've got something to talk about with this La Niña. Because even though the Climate Prediction Center has got the risk, look at the colors, of drought likely developing in through here, can I tell you what could really mess this up? Now, I started the video off saying I'm worried about this coming true, but I told you I'm going to give you some caveats and some things to watch. The first thing you need to watch is if the high, which is slated to be here, moves east. If it does, it opens up Gulf moisture for us. The second thing is what is going on with our La Niña. You see, I can't call this a typical La Niña. It's probably at peak right now, and it's going to fade fast. It's kind of funny. I showed this graphic to my 13-year-old son, and he didn't know what he was looking at. He goes, "Is that the Titanic sinking?" He goes, "Yeah, look, these are the smokestacks, and it's going down." I'm like, no, I'm glad you saw that, but that's not what it is. But listen, I think the Titanic, called La Niña, is sinking. And if you don't mind, I'm going to show you on these maps how it might modify the forecast. Now, I want you to know that I'm not confident in this. I'm presenting to you an alternative possibility to this pattern, knowing that the forecast, if you look out there, December, January, February, is drier here, wetter there, which lines up with everything else you've seen, right? But let's say we get into January, February, March, and the La Niña is fading hard. You know what that ends up doing? Well, if I blow this out to a global equatorial view, what it ends up doing is it ends up moving the MJO into a position where it starts to excite what's called the subtropical jet stream. And that jet stream does that and curls up the East Coast. Now, if we can get ourselves out of the typical La Niña flow, which is no subtropical jet, but instead a jet stream pattern that does this, where all the cold air is here and the high pressure cell sits right there, if you get rid of this and replace it with subtropical flow, there will be no discussion of drought in the second half of winter. None at all. Now, the models aren't calling for it yet. Come back into the United States view. Look, they're drier. You even go out there to, let's go one more, February, March, April. They're drier. And it's not just them. I mean, look at these other forecasts. Look, this is the December, January, February. Risk on the drier, see, the below normal, drier side of average. You can come up here and say, what about January, February, March? Still a drier risk. But I'm going to make a case that the top thing to watch is if the La Niña collapses, what takes over? Because all of these models are just bent on La Niña. So, long story short, there is uncertainty in this pattern, as there always is. I'm not telling you anything new. But now we've put some definitions around what needs to move, what needs to change to understand if we can get out of this risk of truly going over drier this winter. We started here. We know that it's been dry lately. We know that the chances for moisture coming through are not drought busting. We know that our statistics are not in our favor right now. But I'm telling you, the atmosphere right now just gave me a signal that this whole concept of a La Niña dominated winter may not be true. Long story short, and I'm going to shut up, front half of winter probably won't look at all like the back half of winter. And we need to get out of the back half of winter with moisture. So that's the story. I look forward to talking to you again just around Christmas time, and we'll see how this narrative played out. Talk to you then. Thank you.